I'm Tony Cliff, illustrator for Bubble, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's July 9th, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Tony Cliff about Bubble. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Tony is a writer and illustrator currently living in Vancouver, British Columbia. He studied fine art at the Emily Carr Institute of Art and Design, or Emily Carr University, and later attended Capilano College or Capilano University for their commercial animation programs. His first job at an animation school was as a concept artist and art director for a small video game company making a 3D physics-based platformer for the PlayStation 2, garnering skills about animation, 3D, game design, and the game industry. One of his first comic book efforts was a Flight Comics anthology that encouraged Tony to self-publish his own comics, the Eisner Award-nominated Delilah Dirk series. After 3 Delilah Dirk graphic novels, which a 4th is in the planning stage, Tony wrote and illustrated a children's book, Let's Get Sleepy, and also wrote a novel entitled Standard Magic. His most current project is Bubble, for which he was the illustrator. Based on the smash hit audio serial, Bubble is described as a hilarious, high-energy graphic novel with a satirical take on the gig economy. The story centers on Morgan, a citizen of Fairhaven, that's a literal bubble of safety and order, and amazing coffee, in which she resides in the midst of the Brush, a harsh alien wilderness ruled by monstrous imps and rogue bands of humans. During her morning jog, Morgan fends off an imp attack, and then the monster hunting and hilarity begins. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Tony Cliff about Bubble. So, Tony Cliff, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Hello.
I appreciate your time. What I normally do to start off the interview is ask the creator about their first comic book. So I wonder if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
I wish I had a succinct answer for that for you. There are a few that come to mind. I know that my first comics would have either been Garfield collections, or if we're talking about like floppy comics, my grandparents had a collection of comics. I don't know where they got them from. Actually, some of them might have had the cover ripped off, so maybe that means they were remaindered or whatever. But there was like, oh shoot, there's a DC one that I can remember so well. It was like Omega Force or something like that.
Okay.
Which I shouldn't have been reading at the time, and I don't know what it's about. And I the other day I was trying to like look up these characters, like who are these characters that I remember from this thing, and they're all like, I expect in the 2021, I expect if there's a background character like who doesn't even have a name in the DC or Marvel universe, I should be able to find an encyclopedic entry on that, non-character. But I could not find anything on these guys, or I could, but it was pretty limited. But yeah, it was like a combo of that and like Scrooge McDuck comics and probably Archie comics.
Oh sure,
these were all in there, but like Calvin and Hobbes was my Bible growing up. Like, my friend and I would just build blanket forts and then just grab the Calvin and Hobbes and just park under there for afternoons. I'm sure much to everybody's parents' pleasure. Like, where are the kids? I don't know. We can neither see nor hear them.
Yeah, you didn't build those snowmen like Calvin did, did you?
Well, we don't get any snow, so.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
I'm speaking to you from Vancouver, British Columbia.
That's right.
Our Canadian listeners will know that we don't get snow out here, but if you are from elsewhere, no, Vancouver is the part of Canada where we do not actually get snow.
Well, I bet it's something you wish you could do. How about that?
Oh, very much so. Absolutely. Animate snow creatures. Yes, please. And thank you.
There you go.
Jordan and I were talking about this as well. And I know I've got a copy around here of the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, wow.
which my grandparents also bought for me, which is another comic that I should absolutely have not been reading at that age. I don't know if everybody knows, but like that first Ninja Turtles comic was pretty dark, pretty violent, a lot of violence, a lot of blood.
Oh my!
Black and white, very indie looking.
Mm-hmm.
Man, look at those guys now.
Yeah, they sure come a long way, that's for sure.
Anyway, there you go. An encyclopedic answer to this question.
Well, those are some great books to start off with, but I'm wondering who or what influences your work today? Who are you reading today?
That's a tricky question. I don't read a lot of comics. The sort of like the floppy comics model does not work for me. I can't read 20 pages of a comic every month. I need like a complete story to be able to like sit down with or something. And oh man, and if it's usually the artist. It's your writers stay pretty steady, but like when an artist quits or we transition to a different artist in an arc in comic books, I can't take it. I don't know. I latch on to one artist and then as soon as it's a new one, I can't do this with you guys. I feel like I'm going through a divorce or something. Not to make light of divorce. That said, I did just the other day go over to my local comic shop to pick up Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, by Bilquis Evely, I think is how you pronounce her name. She's the artist, and Tom King is a writer, and it's got this great, like retro sci-fi vibe to it that I'm greatly enjoying, and also doesn't seem to require any prior Supergirl knowledge or DC Universe knowledge. So this is really working out for me.
Yeah, I'm hearing good things about it for sure.
Yeah, I asked online. I think it sounds like it's going to be an 8-issue miniseries. Yeah, and this one is doing the thing that I like a lot, and it's what I like about Hellboy and a lot of Mignola stuff, where our narrator and one of the main characters speaks in this like really overwrought, baroque, florid type of language, and then we contrast that with a straight talking, no nonsense, straight shooter type of character. I love that stuff. That gets me every time.
Cool. Good. Well, we're here talking about your latest project, Bubble. So I'm wondering if you could, for those not familiar with it, can you tell me a little bit what it's all about and maybe how you got involved?
I will tell you about Bubble. Bubble is a big old 240-page full-color graphic novel. It's set in an ambiguous sort of, let's say, a future type thing. It's got a vaguely sci-fi premise. We follow our hero, Morgan, as she goes about her busy old day being a regular old, normal hipster, living in her perfect town. But her run is interrupted by a horrific imp monster, and we discover that these monsters come from outside of the giant artificial dome within which all of these people are living, within which this hipster community has been manufactured. And in order to fight all of these monsters that are invading through cracks and holes in the dome, the mega corporation which owns and operates this, human habitation, where is it? It's not. I won't spoil anything, but the mega corporation fires up a a gig economy app called Hunter for people to sign up and become hunters and take menial jobs killing the various creatures that are invading the titular bubble. I think Jordan described it to me pretty early on as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but with a modern twist, with a little bit of a sci-fi taste to it. If you don't know Jordan I know from the Jordan Jesse Go podcast on the Max Fun podcasting empire. He's a very funny guy, very funny writer and podcaster. And so, yeah, you can expect his style of humor in this. Expect a very funny read with a lot of action, a lot of cursing, a lot of violence, plenty of gore, donuts, but also friendship, like really honest friendships.
Sure. Sure. Now, you mentioned the writers Jordan Morris and Sarah Morgan. What was the workflow like with them? Can you describe how you work with them in providing pages or feedback as you were coming along with the project?
We started off. Jordan sent me a script, and I looked at the script and did sort of a rough breakdown, and we determined that the script would make a book about 500 pages long.
Oh my! Wow.
And for a variety of reasons, economical, time-wise, that sort of thing. Because if we tried to make a 500-page book, then with all the work involved, it wouldn't come out for another, 3 or 4 years or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
By which time everybody will have forgotten that Bubble was ever a podcast, and we lose out on that opportunity. Anyway, he sent me the script. I asked some questions like, hey Jordan, it didn't include a lot of comic style breakdown. Like every script writer, every comics writer and script writer is different, and includes different details. Like some writers break down on panel 1, do this, panel 2, do that, yada yada yada.
Yep.
This didn't include any of that, and so we had a conversation early on about, do you want me to do this? Do you want to do this? And we concluded that I would take care of a lot of the adaptation stuff and make the panel choices and the page turn choices and the composition choices and that sort of thing. And then from there, it was just we all just working back and forth, sending Google Docs, having little chats about what do we need to keep, what can we consolidate, what can we cut, and what can we add to take advantage of the fact that it's a graphic novel as opposed to
right.
As opposed to the podcast. Sorry, and I should mention, of course, that Bubble was a mini-series, sort of radio drama podcast. I think there were about a dozen episodes in 2018. Lovingly written by Jordan and a team of writers and acted out by some very talented voice actors. You can go listen to it right now. It's still up there. It's still out there. It's a real funny, delightful thing to listen to.
Cool. No, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
But yeah, no, a lot of back and forth, a lot of Google Docs, a lot of guys. I need the name for Mitch one of the characters. Mitch has a party bus. Guys, I need the name for a party bus. Give me that, and then they'd give me a dozen different alternatives, and we'd all sort of be like, how about this? And then there would be this one choice, and be like, oh, Sarah nailed it. Okay, that's clearly the one we going with. And so Mitch's party bus is called I Like Big Bus and I Cannot Lie.
Oh, okay. Very good.
He's got little flyers that say I'm into bus stuff.
Cool. Oh, that's good.
This is our mature book for adults and sophisticates.
Right. Sure. Now, you mentioned Bubbles is based on a podcast. Did you listen to it prior to working on this project?
Yeah, I had, and it was I had, and it made me. It just made it very easy to say yes. Okay, yes, I will absolutely work on that. I had been listening to it while I was working on other comics and that sort of thing.
Right.
So when I got a call from my agent saying, "Oh, hey, your editor for a second is considering this project. Would you be interested?" I was like, "Oh, I know exactly what that is. I know exactly who's working on it. Yeah, absolutely. Sign me up."
Cool. Now, do you have any other podcasts that you listen to while you're working?
Do you ask this question of everybody?
No. This is just a curious one because it comes out of nowhere.
Okay.
Normally, some artists will listen to music as they're creating. Some will definitively say, well, when you're reading my book, when I'm done, you should listen to this music because that's what's coming from the pages, and I want you to experience it. But I'm just curious to know, do you listen to podcasts in general while you're working?
Oh, no. The reason I asked is because, perhaps you are, or perhaps you are not aware that drawing comic book pages gives you just great expanses of time during which, you couldn't ask for a more perfect podcast consumer other than a comic book artist. You just got 8 hours a day. You're working on some drawing. When you're drawing a page, It's just like the part of your brain that can listen to podcasts is perfect, is just like doing nothing, just twiddling his thumbs. And the part that, needs to be drawing is drawing. So, yeah, I mean, like, geez. Over the years, there's been, like, I was listening to Jordan Jesse Go back when there were 12 podcasts on the internet, and Jordan Jesse Go was one of them. And then more recently, I've been binging Omnibus, which is the podcast with Ken Jennings, who you'll recognize from Jeopardy,
right,
and John Roderick of The Long Winters, and a few other podcasts. And it's just a really interesting, actually, between Omnibus and between a podcast called You're Wrong About, it's been really interesting to revisit sort of the history of the time that I grew up, like things that happened during the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, and just sort of revisit them from a different angle and sort of, I don't know, get a fresh take on something that was sort of in the background of my life and that sort of thing. Like I understood the Gulf War through the lens of Gulf War trading cards. Like you could get just by trading cards. It was like, this one's a Tomahawk missile, and this one's an intercontinental ballistic missile or something like that. And so, but because I was whatever age I was then, I was a young teen, or perhaps even younger. And it's funny to look back on that and then also, revisit through these podcasts and sort of understand the machinations and the who's and the whys, and that sort of thing, and see how they all connect to our modern, I was going to say hellscape, but let's say our modern life.
Right. Get a better understanding of things. Yeah, makes sense. I want to switch gears a bit and talk about the tools that you use to create your art. Now, I am going to assume you're a traditional artist. Is that correct?
For the most part.
Okay. What tools do you use then?
I've been changing it up over the last little bit. So I studied animation. I trained in animation. And in animation, they teach you how to draw a very clean pencil line. So for like prior to Bubble, I worked on a series of 3 graphic novels called Delilah Dirk. And for each of those 3 graphic novels, they're each about like 200 pages. I've been drawing with just a clean pencil line. And people ask me, how did you ink this? I said, I didn't. I just drew it with a really nice, tight, clean pencil line. And then you scan it in and you use Photoshop to just blow it out, or knock out the whites and turn the dark parts dark black. For Bubble, I wanted to try something a little different, and I had one of those Wacom drawing screens, a Cintiq. I was like, let's do this entire thing digitally and see what sort of effect we get out of it. And I just got, it's weird because drawing digitally introduces a lot of, or has the potential to introduce a lot of bad habits and that sort of thing. But I finished the book last year and sent it off to Natalie Reese to do the color work, and she did a lovely job. But I haven't seen the book until then. And then just today, like literally today, the day that we were recording this, early in July, I just got my author copies of it, and I'm flipping through it. I'm like, oh, I really like the way this digital inking, this digital line work turned out. Gave me an opportunity to explore or to play with like solid blacks a little bit more. It's something I'm kind of timid about. Like I don't do using the sort of pencil and paper method. I wasn't doing a lot of solid blacks or like big strong value differences. It was, people have said, oh, it's very lean clair. I'm like, well, that's a nice comparison to make. But thank you. But so something new to try. I'm happy with how it turned out. I'm currently at work on a 4th Delilah Dirk book.
Oh, okay.
I'm going back to paper because my Cintiq is on its last legs. And also I don't like looking at the computer screen is something I discovered. Yeah. So I'm going back to paper. I'm using ink. I'm using ink and brushes and brush pens and that sort of thing. And so trying to take some of the things trying to take some of the lessons I learned drawing digitally freeing up, getting a little looser with the blacks, trying, washes and watercolor elements and that sort of thing, taking that out of the computer and going back to paper because,
Sure.
why not? It's good for your eyes.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice
Absolutely. Yeah. So, being that said, I'm wondering if you have any advice for someone who wants to make their own comic book or graphic novel. Do you have like one piece of advice you'd want to pass along?
I have one. There is one piece of advice that I like to repeat to people if you are foolish enough to want to make comics. I remember I think it was a PowerPoint slide or something for a presentation Hope Larson was giving. And one of her bits of advice was get a job that pays well and has flexible hours, like being a plumber. Apparently the money's very good, but there's also a lot of downtime, which means you're financially stable, but you also have the time to get out, to get your pencils out and get to work. That's great advice. I like that. But I also recommend people to start small.
Okay.
And this is not like universal advice. I don't know if this will work for everybody, but the first comics I made professionally were for the Flight anthologies in the early 2000s. So they were all short stories. So and each one was around 20 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something that does that I think. So I'm comparing this to the idea of saying, okay, I want to make a comic. It's going to be 1,000 pages long. It's going to be an epic. It's going to have all this scope and scale. Right. Yeah. So I'm just going to start. I'm going to make all 1,000 pages. I think that has worked for some people. Faith Aaron Hicks.
Yes, right.
I think that has been her, or that's like how she got into it. She just like dove into a webcomic and it worked out for her. Mm-hmm. It may work out for you, but personally, like I'm very glad that I had the opportunity to finish these short stories that I did for Flight, which means I started at the beginning, wrote them, roughed them out, asked for feedback from the other Flight crew people, and then laid them out and cleaned them up and colored them. And then they were printed and it was finished. And I think there's a lot of value in going through that entire process, especially if that's something you want to keep doing. In the future is like making your own books. You learn a lot. You learn about how you like to do all these things. And then at the end, you've got a finished thing. So you're no longer an aspiring comics artist. You're no longer a beginning comic artist, or you're no longer working on your first project. Like your thing's done. Your story's done. I think there's a lot of value in that.
Absolutely. No, that's good stuff. Now, you mentioned before being an animator in addition to being an illustrator. So I'm wondering if you have a preference. Do you prefer illustration or animation?
No, I do not. Okay. I do not prefer. Sorry. I do not prefer one over the other. Okay. Animation. A thing that I love about animation is that you get to spend time in a studio with a lot of other people who have similar sort of sense of humor, who also grew up reading Ninja Turtle comics, et cetera, watching Transformers, that sort of thing. And it's a nice environment to be in, especially, like if you're on an animation team, you'll be there with other people and you're just like, you sit around and kick jokes around and spitball things and that's a really fun environment to be in. And it's one of the things I liked most about working on Bubble. That's one of the things I was really looking forward to about working on Bubble, is the chance to, kick jokes around with Jordan and Sarah. But then, the advantages, the comics, obviously animation, you get the pluses and minuses of working on a team. In comics, it's all up to you. And also, you get to do everything. If you're a visually inclined person, it's, you can make an entire book by yourself. And it can have, as much scale as you want. It could, you can make that 1,000 page, space epic if you want, and you can't say the same thing about making a feature film. Or,
right.
I mean, I say that, but I do know someone who just finished a feature film by himself, an animated feature film by himself. Denver Jackson, you are an insane man.
Okay.
And if you, but yeah, like if you're a person, if you're a person who prefers the solitude, like comics is amazing. Like that is a great strength of working on comics, is you get to spend a lot of time with your cats. I don't have any cats,
right?
But one day,
sure.
That's still
something to work towards. Yeah,
exactly, something to work towards.
Yeah. Now you mentioned before there's another Delilah Dirk book coming along. Wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
I can. I had a bit of I was going to say meltdown, but that's not true. I was doing a bit of rethinking of things around the start of this year, just trying to think about. So here's something new. As of last fall, I now have a child in my life.
Wow, congrats.
Who requires, thank you, who requires care and attention in a way that is very different from what I'm used to, which is, get up in the morning, eat my breakfast, take a walk around the block, and then just, draw cartoon characters for 8 hours. So there's that element in my life. And so I'm trying to figure out how to balance that with, okay, how do I, keep making comics? Because there is a fourth Delilah Dirk story that I would like to tell. It's all plotted out. It's all ready to go. I've already started it, basically. I just need to find the time to draw all the pages and stuff. So I'm currently, I'm going back to the way that I did it with the first book, which was just to I don't have a publishing deal for it. I don't have a deadline for it. I'm just going out. I'm going to make a comic book. It's going to take a little bit longer than it would ordinarily because of this, young human who requires care and attention.
Sure.
Maybe I should just get a cat. If I had a cat.
I don't think you can train them in. I don't think it works that way.
I could, so I can't train the cat to look after the child, or they wouldn't mutually look after each other.
You never know. I've seen some interesting YouTube videos. You never know. You could.
I feel like there's a Disney movie where this. Yes. I don't know. Isn't there with a child and a pet, cavorting across America or something like? And they're both just looking out for each other.
That's right.
How can we make that happen? He seems to be a bright child, so I don't want to underestimate him. So a few new life pressures. So I'm just sort of like, God, if you want to read way too much about it, I have a blog over on my website, and you can read about some very detailed notes on ways I'm trying to make comics a little bit differently. But I just listened to a great interview with fellow Canadian Carl Kerschel, talking about his method for making comics now and being an independent comic maker. And a lot of his ideas were like, oh yeah, that's yes, those are some ideas that I've been exploring. So.
Good. You had some free time on your hands because you were able to get a book done called Let's Get Sleepy. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. What's that all about?
After I finished the third Delilah Dirk book, it had been, the deadline had been tight, and I just got in under the wire. And there were a couple other reasons that sort of, or actually no, I turned that in late. But either way, there are a couple of other reasons that was a very pressure-filled scenario, and I was like, okay, I don't want to. I couldn't stand the idea of making another comic book. Basically, I felt burnt out. So I was like, I want to try making a kids book. And so I did that.
Okay, cool. Well, what is it all about? How would you describe it to someone?
It came from a place of wanting to make a book that was fun to read aloud for children. Because I had seen Vera Brosgol read her kids' book, Leave Me Alone, in front of a room full of kids. And it was absolutely fantastic. So in her book, she's got these repeated passages where the character in the book screams, "Leave me alone!" And it's so much fun to get an entire room of children screaming that, the repeated refrain over and over and over again. I'm like, I want to do something. I want to do something similar with that. And so I also wanted to pay homage to Where's Waldo the Where's Waldo books I loved, and Cars and Trucks and Things That Go, those books that I grew up with. And so we have this story of, speaking of cats, of these cats who are, the book is called Let's Get Sleepy. In the book, Sleepy is a mouse, and the cats are all trying to catch him. And so it's an adventure that goes over the course of many, many pages. And on each page, there are about 1,000 cats, and you can try and find the same cats. There's a cat that's always picking up golf clubs. There's a cat that's always picking flowers. There are two cats. One stole the other's hat, and so they're chasing each other. And you can always find Sleepy on every page. You can always get Sleepy on every page. But by the end of the book, our main character spoiler alert, has not actually got Sleepy, but through all his adventures throughout the day, he does in fact get Sleepy. Anyway, and then we learn the lessons that, sure, you didn't accomplish the goal that you set out to accomplish, but look at all the good experiences you've had along the way, and look at all the people you've met, and that sort of thing. And it's very sweet, and it's bright, and it's colorful, and it has that repeated refrain of "Let's get sleepy." Back in 2019, I did get the pleasure of getting to take the book out to grade 1 classes and read it aloud, and that was fantastic. Sure. Unfortunately, the book was then released last year in the middle of a pandemic, so. Yeah. Didn't get the best of it, but that is out there. If you are a cat lover, if you have a child 2 to 7 years old in your life, and you would like a fun book about the value of the journey as opposed to the destination, but also lots of cats having fun.
Sounds good.
Let's Get Sleepy might be the book for you.
Might be. You never know. Well, we've talked about Bubble. We've talked about Delilah Dirk, but I'm wondering, is there anything else that's coming up down the road that you can talk about if you have any free time?
As part of that sort of burnout episode after DD3, I also set about writing a novel, which I finished and is currently in my agent's hands. Apparently it is a bad time to take a novel out. Also, it has the disadvantage of being very long, which is not a strength in a first novel, but it's done. And also I overcame all that burnout and am back to making comics again. So, feeling all right. But no, I'm excited for people to read Bubble. As I was just describing before, I finished it a year ago. So I'm kind of looking at it again for the first time with it in my hands right now and seeing things that I forgot about. I'm like, oh yeah, this is this is a fun book. So I'm really excited for people to read it. I'm hoping, that if I'm hoping that people will pre-order it. Actually, if you are, God, there's so many ways. Are you a video game person at all?
I've been playing Call of Duty for the last 4 years. World War II.
Well, Call of Duty is one of those ones where it's like, if you pre-order this, you can get this skin and that skin.
Right.
But if you pre-order the legendary platinum edition, you get this skin and that skin, et cetera, et cetera. They make it about as complicated as possible, right? I always heard about those things. I'm like, God, that's so annoying. But now here we are with Bubble. If you pre-order it from my local bookstore here in Vancouver, I'll do a drawing in it for you and a dedication. Mm-hmm. If you pre-order it from this other bookstore in the States, then you get a book plate with all of our signatures on it. Nice. If you pre-order it from a place in Los Angeles, you get it signed by Jordan. And I'm just like, is this how all those video game people end up with those nonsense, platinum game of the year, deluxe, triple gold edition.
Sure. Right. Or better yet, we hold out for conventions to come back and just bring your own copy and get it signed by you and the other team members as well.
Boy, I'm looking forward to conventions.
Yeah.
Which is not something I am right in the middle of the road on conventions.
Yeah.
I like them a lot. I also don't feel like I belong there a lot, but man, yeah, I'm looking forward to a good convention.
Sure.
Anyway, sorry. That was all to get around to saying, like, if you don't feel like pre-ordering one of these books, a very beneficial thing for us would be if you were to contact your local library and say, hey, would you please get this book in?
Mm-hmm.
That may seem counterintuitive, but it is beneficial for everybody involved, really.
Absolutely.
I mean, assuming you like the book.
Well, absolutely. Why wouldn't they? Sounds like a great thing. So with all that work that you have going on and future work, I'm wondering where you recommend people go to find out more about you online and through social media.
Oh, geez. You can find me at TonyCliff.com or TonyCliff.ca. Also, it's got links to all my social media garbage. Like, by the time you hear this, will Instagram still even exist? Who knows?
Yes.
Will Twitter? Who knows? It's just, these days, if you're making comics, I don't know, social media, man. Have your own website, please, everybody. As we were talking this past weekend, there was a lot of drama about Instagram changing some of their policies or practices in the future, and people are like, well, but Instagram is my living. It's just like, man, yeah, but like 100. I know people who have built a living on Instagram and their Instagram followers and stuff. It's just like, you gotta have your own site because these places just go up and down and up and down and up and down. Like,
yeah.
Some of us remember MySpace, some of us remember MSN Messenger, some of us remember Friendster. And like, what's it going to be next year? I'm surprised Twitter is stuck around this long.
There you go.
Anyway, I've got a dedicated Twitter for Delilah Dirk if you just want Delilah Dirk news. If you want to hear me complain about software programs, well, then I have my own personal Twitter account. And there's also an Instagram for now for Delilah Dirk. But yeah, those are the places I am located.
Thanks to Tony for the chat. You can discover more about Tony on Twitter at Tango Charlie, and on Instagram at Delilah Dirk. That's DELILAHDIRK. And online at TonyCliff.ca. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.